Hey everybody, it's Thursday evening and I want to do a round the world update here. I just feel like it's been a while since we've done one and I've had a lot going on this week. I don't really know what I have covered and haven't covered here in the fish room, so we're going to do an impromptu trip around the world here and talk about what's going on in each of the tanks. So nothing going on in this tank. You can see the water level is a little bit low. It's probably time to get in there and do a water change. I don't recall having topped this tank off since the last time I did a water change, so it probably hasn't been that long. As you can probably tell, I don't keep any kind of strict schedule of when I do these water changes. I just do them when I feel like it's time to do them. And so it's probably about time. If not, it needs to be topped off one way or the other. Get in here and do a little bit of simple maintenance, replace the filter, that sort of thing. My Anubias, even though it looks nice and lush and green, is also looking like it's getting a little bit of off-flux growing on it, a little bit of patina of surface growth there. And I was getting a little concerned that my little clown pleco that's in this tank was maybe not in there anymore. I hadn't seen it in a while, and while it normally does a really good job of keeping this tank clean, you know, that's a little bit of growth starting to build up. So I'm happy to say when I turned the lights on this morning, that clown pleco was on the front glass and it dashed down and disappeared down into the rocks once the lights were on. So it is still in there and it is still healthy. It's probably a matter of the Anubias is getting so large that the more surface it has to clean, you know, the less surface it's going to get clean. It's only one little fish. It's only going to eat so much, clean so much surface area. So that's about all that's going on in here. I can't really think of anything else worth mentioning or talking about. Everybody else is looking good. I love this angelfish. I think it's a really understated angelfish, but it's a really, really pretty angelfish. I really like the fin structure on it. It almost looks like a perfect triangle. It doesn't have the look of a normal angelfish. Of course, it's not going to cooperate and come out into the brighter light. And admittedly, this is one of my more poorly lit tanks. So anyway, moving on from the 29 miscellaneous to the gourami tank. Gourami tank's blacked out at the moment. I don't have it covered or draped with anything. I've simply got the lights in there turned off. In fact, you can probably make out a little bit of movement in there. That's the angelfish swimming around. I'm not really sure what to expect when we turn the lights back on. I will attach a card to a video I did the other day, and you'll see all the work I did if you're interested. But I got in there, I removed a bunch of the plants, I mean almost all of the plants. I scrubbed the glass down, did mad water changes on it, and we're beginning the process of trying to get the blackbeard algae that's in there eradicated once and for all, or at least knocked back far enough that my off-flux grazing fish that are in this tank will be able to stay on top of it and prevent it from coming back in, you know, in the way it was before in there. It was just covering everything. So we're going to move on. Since there's not a lot to look at there, we're going to move on to my 55-gallon T-bar tank. Not a lot to talk about in this tank either. I haven't really done anything in here, just kind of been rolling along feeding it. You can see the little tip of the nose of my, I believe that's a sailfin pleco, but I'm not 100% sure on that. If you remember, I recently replaced that heater. I can say that it has been functioning properly. I do see it go a little bit above 25 occasionally, and when it drops down to 24, the lights come on, you know, indicating that it's warming the tank. And every time I check the water with an external thermometer, it's always sitting right there at 25 degrees Celsius. So my new heater seems to be working pretty good, and I've gotten quite used to seeing that digital display. I can glance in from the other room, and it just seems a little reassuring for some reason to see that little number 25 just sitting there like that. So at first I was kind of thinking I wasn't going to like the way that looked, but it's actually grown on me, and it's a little bit of a comforting reassurance for some reason now. I'm not really sure why that is, but I feel better seeing it when I look in here now. I suppose I'm going to have to get in here and do a little bit of plant work. Wow, I didn't even realize the plant down on this end is growing almost up to the surface. So as usual, I will have water Sprite. I've got lots of Java Fern available for sale, and now I'm going to have some Anubias because I will get in there and cut that down pretty soon. I'm going to take that whole chunk of that top rhizome off. We'll cut it down in there somewhere, and then I'll be able to cut that into a few smaller pieces. So I will have some chunks of Anubias available. I guess I'll probably do the same thing on this side. We'll cut it down so it's two matching clumps. This side, of course, is flowering in multiple places, and it's doing really well. I often wonder what this would look like if I didn't have that rubber lip in there. I mean, I'm sorry, not that rubber lip, the that sailfin, that big pleco we just looked at. I'm knocking stuff everywhere over here. That's what it does. It scrapes those leaves clean, and all of the little grooves and textured in it where it can't really scrape the surface clean is where what you're seeing, all that sort of red stuff on there. So I'm not sure whether that's diatom algae, I'm not sure whether that's cyanobacteria, but that gets scraped off by that big pleco. So once I take that fish out of the tank, I'm really kind of curious to see what's going to happen and how brown this tank is actually going to become, and if it isn't going to suddenly be a panic to get a new fish in there to sort of take up the job of the one that I'm going to be removing eventually, because that pleco is getting really big. It needs to come out of there soon. This tank looks horrible. Got to be careful. I got a tripod sitting right behind me from last night's video. This tank looks awful. I've had an explosion of that green junk. I changed the lighting over on this tank. I went from the T5 high output, and then I put some LEDs on here. And the LEDs are actually probably putting out more light. And it's probably a lower quality light than what I had on here. Now, I am saving electricity, but I've just had an explosion of this stuff. Now, don't get me wrong, I've had to deal with this stuff in this tank when I did have the T5s on here. I've always dealt with this in this tank, and I have been sort of, not really doing a whole lot in here over the last week or so. So, as usual, I'm sure the water is fine. I haven't actually checked it, but I'm sure the water in here is fine. It's just, it needs a treatment again. I got to get in there and set the air stone up and run a treatment through it, and we'll do that as I do 2 or 3 times a year on this tank. So that'll be coming up pretty soon. Other than that, not a lot to talk about. I just saw the tip of the tail of the black ghost knifefish sitting out there. I guess you can kind of see it. That little bit right there is the tail of it. So it is still in there. I did see it wiggling its tail around the other day, although I still haven't seen it actually come out fully in quite a while. I'm still adjusting to the look of the new LEDs in here. It's a very soft light compared to what I used to have in here. I used to have between 6500K and 10,000K, and now we've got what they're calling 4,000K, but there's new. I just don't believe that's 4,000K. That looks 3,500, maybe even 3,000K to me. So there you go. That's what's going on in this tank. So moving along to my 125-gallon native tank. No changes in here. Nothing really going on. Not a lot to talk about. I have not seen hide nor hair of any crayfish in a long time. I always do sort of hope I'll get a glimpse of a small one that's been surviving under the rocks in there all this time or something, but I think that's a very, very slim possibility at this point. I did shoot a video last night of feeding this tank, so if you want to check out my native tank playlist, you can see this tank in action. Otherwise, like I said, there's not really a lot to talk about going on in here. I haven't done anything to it. I haven't done any water changes or made any changes to the filtration or the lighting or anything in this tank. So just kind of ticking over like a clock. My snail tank, normally not really worth mentioning, has had sort of an explosion in growth. We'll see if we can see from this end what it looks like. And that's actually after I've been spending the last several days in there pulling them out. And you see all those little globs all over the glass? That's all eggs. So I'm going to have a lot more in here. I realized a while ago that I've actually had a couple of shrimp living in this tank for a long time. And the shrimp have probably been eating the eggs and little baby snails and everything and keeping the population under check. And I recently pulled the snails out and put them in my waterfall tank. I'm sorry, not the snails, the shrimp. I pulled them out and put them in my waterfall tank. And when I was in there, I found that there were several little baby shrimp. So they were breeding, not prolifically, but they were breeding. And there are some baby shrimp in there somewhere. But when I took the big ones out, I've now had sort of an explosion of snails. So I've been using them and throwing them in some of my tanks that have loaches in them, in addition to my puffer tank. Of course, the puffer always gets the snails as a staple food, but my loaches have now been getting snails as treats because I have so many snails going on in that tank. It's amazing the difference of just pulling those couple little shrimp out of there made. So my purple spotted gudgeon tank, I like the lighting on this. This is the new LED retrofit T8 tubes. I had to go with 2 of the 5000K color temperature because the 2700K, I could never get any of them to work for some reason. Although I did get 2 of the 4-foot 2700Ks to work in a shop lamp. But those are the only 2700K of those lights I ever got working. All of the other ones either burned out my ballasts or they themselves sizzled and burned out. But I never really had any issues with the 5000K. And so that's what we're stuck with in this tank. It's a little more intense than I would like, and as a result, you can see that the stuff that I had going on in this tank already, if you watch this, if you watch my videos regularly, you'll know that I already had a lot of that green growth in there. I've been talking for quite a while about getting in this tank and doing some of that, ultralife treatment. But now that I've put those new lights on there and really kicked the lighting up, look how much stuff I've got growing right directly on the sand. So that's completely new, and it's very indicative of a lot more lighting, because if you'll remember, I had that really terrible LED strip lighting that I'd made myself on this tank, and it was just awful. It provided no light. In fact, my light from my waterfall tank, the LED, actually put more light in this tank than the lights that were for this tank. And so once I got rid of them and put this amount of lighting on it, you can see the difference it made. So, everything in an aquarium is a balance. You change one little thing and it just throws it's like a chain reaction. And once one thing starts shifting, you never know. And it might take a while to actually get things back into some sort of balance once you've made some major change, like seriously increasing or decreasing your lighting, or seriously increasing your bioload, or the way you feed. Any of those things can have a really serious sort of chain reaction effect by just shifting the whole balance of everything. And in these tanks where I've changed the lighting over as radically as I have, we can see perfect examples of that. So moving on to my 125, this one we kind of have to pan across, and then we'll step around my waterfall tank here for a moment. And then we get a look at the whole thing. Now I just got in here the other day and I did a nice big fat water change on it. I wiped all the glass down. I did not a gravel vacuum so much as I got my hands in there and just sort of swooshed up all of the mulm and cruddy stuff that collects in the corners and stuff, and really just stirred it up and got a lot of stuff out of the tank. I removed a lot of the floating water sprite that's in there. You'll notice on the left I've got a couple of fairly large chunks that are still in there, but that is really thinned out. You can see the light's actually shining through the plant itself. There's still a lot of material, plant material in there, a lot of coverage, but the light is actually shining through it. Whereas before I had even more coverage than that. It was front to back. The little corner where I always feed my Tenopoma was not even there anymore. I was just kind of pushing the krill down through. It was dense, it was thick. And it was so dense and thick that the light was not even shining through, and underneath of it, this whole end of the tank was just dark. So that made a huge difference. The glass was growing, a thick film of green stuff on it, especially down at this end where we had a lot more light shining on it. And I think by cutting back on quite as many algae wafers as I've been putting in there recently, we're starting to see a little bit of a reduction of all of the growth that's going on here. And I'm not really sure why, because I didn't really do anything or change anything about it, but we're starting to see a lot of the fuzzy green growth that was all over my Anubias down here is sort of starting to go away. So maybe whatever was causing all of that, getting shifted out of balance in this tank is sort of starting to settle back in, and we're getting back into somewhat of a routine. It's interesting to see my catfish sitting in there so relaxed and still when I'm right this close to the tank. Normally he'll at least drift away a little bit. Maybe feels like he's hidden well enough. And of course there's my Tenopoma, and that's my buddy there. I love this fish. Probably my favorite fish. I know you might think naturally that butterbean would be my favorite fish, but I really do think this Tenopoma, if I really had to pick one fish, it would probably be this one. And then that would be a hard choice to make. It's like asking a parent their favorite child, or asking me which one of my cats is my favorite cat or something. But that Tenopoma is just an awesome fish. I really, really recommend them to anybody that has the size tank for them. Now, you probably don't need a 125, but don't listen to the pet store when they tell you that they'll go fine in a 30. I found that it outgrew a 40, which is what I started it in, and then I went right to this 125. But I would imagine a 55 would be about enough. A 70 would be great. 70, 75, somewhere around in that area. Maybe one of those odd, 60-gallon tanks or something would be good. But don't listen to the pet store when they tell you that a Tenopoma can live in a 30-gallon tank. They cannot. They get big. My 20-gallon angelfish tank. This tank was looking pretty rough a while ago too. I changed the lights in this one as well. Another one of those LED retrofits. This is an 18-inch tube, so a lot less light. But things have settled down. I haven't actually gotten in here and wiped the glass down in a while. I have done a water change not too long ago. But again, you can see by the low water level, it is probably about time to get in here and do a water change. Now, remember, in this tank, I've got not one, but two of those big, fat mystery snails. I've got live bears that are algae eaters, and then I've also got, on cue right there, we saw a little bit of movement. That is another one of those clown plecos, and you can see how nicely scraped clean that wood is. Not all species of plecos need wood, but as a general rule of thumb, it's better safe than sorry. So if you've got any kind of pleco, you should probably have at least some natural wood in the tank for them to chew on. Some of them actually rely on it for dietary needs, and then others rely on it for the fiber, and the fiber gets in their gut and helps them digest the other stuff they eat, similar to the way a chicken or a bird will get stones in their gizzard, and it'll help them grind up that tougher fibrous material. A lot of plecos actually need that wood fiber for a similar purpose. So if you're not sure if your pleco or your rubber lip or your little bristlenose or whatever you've got that's similar to that, if you're not sure if it needs wood, probably better safe to assume that it does than doesn't. And you can see how beautiful and clean that wood is, and that's because it gets scraped and chewed on quite a lot. And so this tank is really starting to look nice and well-rounded and balanced. For a little while there, it was getting kind of to be an eyesore like a few of my other tanks are sitting right now. But all in all, I'm happy with the way this one's looking right now. Speaking of eyesores, my little quarantine tank, which has not really been used for quite a long time, is just kind of sitting here, and now I've got that horrible green stuff growing all over everything in here, and that's probably because I took that moss ball that's in my 29-gallon tank a long time ago, and I pulled it out and I threw it in this tank, and it just shifted the balance of everything, and now I've got that weird green stuff that was already in here before. Now it's growing all over everything. And so again, one of these days I'll just get in here, but this tank is far from a priority. I've got two little Endler's guppies in there, just sort of to keep the tank going and keep it a living cycled tank. And I've also got those two coolie loaches in here. I do still see them come out from time to time, and so I know that they are still in there and still doing their thing. And so Butterbean's tank, the last tank that we're probably going to look at seriously. We might have a quick look at the waterfall tank, but Butterbean's tank here is the last one we're going to talk about in any real length tonight. First of all, you can probably tell it needs some treatment. Got to get in there and do a water change. I want to wipe down the front glass, obviously. But this is another tank that I've been having issues with. Now that I'm thinking about it, I was lying to you earlier when I said I wasn't having problems with the 5000K tubes. This tank is another one that's that weird, it's got the 3-foot length tubes. but or fixtures rather, but it's a 2-foot tube. So and this is actually a piece of PVC you're seeing right here. This is not a tube. I've actually stuck a razor blade in the PVC tube rather than the piece of wood like I used to use. I just use a regular hacksaw to cut a notch, used a pair of pliers to sort of force the razor blade in there, and there's my scraper. And with it being a hollow tube, you know, it is an open PVC tube, so when I scrape up and down, it's not like a wooden plug at the end that causes a lot of water movement. So I find that open tube actually slides through the water pretty easily. I'm really happy with that little tweak I made there to my homemade scraper on a little side note, since we just happened to notice it. At any rate, my 3-foot fixture takes a 2-foot tube. The one in the front, I could not get. I tried 3 of those tubes and they would not work, and then eventually when I put the fluorescent tube back in, that didn't work either. So I think it was probably an older ballast, it's an older fixture, and putting that LED retrofit in there probably burned that ballast up too, and that was one of the 5000K tubes. As you can see in the back, that's another one of those 5000K. I was trying to put 2 of them on here, and that forward fixture just wouldn't accept it. It wouldn't work, and then eventually it burned out the ballast. So what I did was I took the fixture that was on my tank in the office. It was an LED fixture designed for planted tanks, and I put that across the front of the tank, and you can see that makes a lot of light, and it's got those blue and red LEDs, so it cranks out the light that is good for plants to use, the PAR light, and that's a weird sort of misleading term. All light from just below what we can see to just above what we can see technically classifies as PAR light, which is photosynthetically active radiation. So all light is PAR light. This light cranks out some of the peak spectrums that plants really like to absorb, and it puts out a lot of them. And that's why it was not turned on. I came to realize that that's just way more light than is needed. I'm not in here most of the day. If I want to turn that on to shoot some video, or I want to come in here and see Butterbean's fabulous colors, or those orange sailfin mollies, which are no joke in their own right. Those are stunning fish, especially when they get underneath of this light. That might be a little too intense underneath the light, washing the camera out a little bit. But that's, you know, that's a when needed light at this point. All throughout the day I don't need to worry about that, but again, when I come in here and I want to get some video of Butterbean, especially if I want to do some you know, in the tank shooting, when I do my feeding videos, they should be lit with this light from now on. So I think it's really going to make all those colors pop. And of course, when those orange sailfin mollies get down near the bottom and they start doing their thing, they are going to look amazing too. So soon I will be getting in here. I'll be doing some video of the, you know, cleaning the tank up, whatever you call that thing, water change, that's what it's called. I'll be in here doing some water change video pretty soon. And if anybody wants me to talk about like brackish water and brackish tanks, I tend to forget that, you know, just because I've spoken about this in the past doesn't mean that I shouldn't sort of revisit some of these basic topics, like my brackish basics video, where I just do talk about brackish water and what it consists of and how to make it and why fish need it and so on and so forth. So if that's something you're interested in, let me know, and you know, I can always sort of revisit those more basic topics. And so instead of finishing up on the 29 where we normally finish up, today we will turn around here and we'll finish up on the waterfall tank. Turn the really serious light on. And I've probably still got aphids. I actually haven't checked in the last day or so. Again, I'm still not done with my hecticness. Well, we can see right here, I can tell you, yes, we do still have aphids. I can see some of them right there. Well, again, I'm not going to jump down the rabbit hole of inspecting this waterfall tank here, since this is my first real look at it. When I said this is an impromptu video, I was not kidding. So I am sort of looking at it myself now to see what there is to talk about, if anything. So I've got my plants back, at least a few of them. They're doing okay. My philodendron looks like it's starting to come back okay. That got brutalized pretty bad by the aphids. my new dead nettles. There we go. I knew I'd think of it if I gave myself enough time. They are doing well. I've been staying on top of watering them without over-watering them. If you'll notice the big empty spot here, that was where I had a soft planter, a soft-sided planter, cloth planter, with petunias in it. It has some white and ivory or white and purple petunias. I'm sorry, purple and ivory petunias. And they didn't do so well because of that soft side. You know, I had it sitting in the water, and petunias are really not marginal plants. They can't really live in that damp soil like that. Even if it is well oxygenated, it's still, they don't really do well in damp soil. So I removed them, and I have made sure that I'm not overwatering my dead nettles there. And as we get the new growth that comes in, it's a really pretty plant in its own little way. The coloration on these leaves is very subtle, but it has almost like these silvery colors, and then like the burgundy colors come into it. So I'm actually really happy with the way they're looking, and if I can get it, I'm going to try to get it to come down and flow over this log, because that thing drives me crazy. I've been trying to get rid of that broken branch on the end of that log ever since I put this thing in the, you know, set it up basically. My lemon tree got hit pretty bad by the aphids as well. I had to put it somewhere else where it was not getting anywhere near sufficient light for, you know, a citrus fruit tree. They need a lot of light, a lot of intense light, and you can see it kind of took a beating as a result. And we've lost some leaves, and the new growth that started coming out got sort of stunted. You know, that was going to be some nice new growth, and that got hit by the aphids, all that tender stuff. So it's doing okay. It'll snap back, needs a watering, but other than that, we're doing okay. Nothing really going on plant or animal wise that I can think of down here. Got one of my little nearite snails in there. I should have 5 nearite snails in there. That's how many I put in. I don't know if that's how many are still alive or not, but that's how many. I can see another one back there. This is just a regular old pond snail. I got lots of pond snails in there. I've thrown them in there both for possible food sources for some of the fish. I don't know if they eat snails or not, but they've got the option now if they want them. And of course, they'll just help keep the tank clean as well. And I am also considering planting some actual plants in here, and instead of doing just the floating plants, doing a nice little planted tank. It doesn't have to be native at all. I don't really care about it being a native tank, so I can plant whatever kind of plants I want in there. And so that's an option. That's something that's on the horizon. And last but not least, we will look at my red clawed crab tank. I'm not sure, honestly, if there's even any still left in there. There probably is, but I've not seen any hide nor hair of them in a while. So I'm just kind of assuming that they're still in there. And at this point, of course, it's just the name of the tank. Whether they're even in the tank or not, honestly, doesn't even matter. So this plant is not sitting, touching this brackish water. This is another brackish tank. It's sitting in a tray because that plant would die very quickly. Both if it was wet all the time, that's a plant that does not need to be in a lot of water at all. In fact, it needs to kind of dry out before you water it again. And it is also not being exposed to the brackish water because it's in a little tray right there. And then my little bromelade is doing okay, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to wrap it up because we're wrapping up on 28 minutes now, so that's even longer than I thought it was. So there you go, everybody, my little trip around the world. Don't forget to subscribe because you don't want to miss all the stuff I got coming up. We're going to be getting to my gourami tank in the next day or so. I'm going to be turning the lights back on and seeing what we've got, you know, after a 4-day blackout. So that's going to be interesting. Again, make sure you're subscribed. You won't miss that or anything else. Don't forget this one here is my waterfall tank. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you real soon in the next one.